What a fabulous opportunity to be with you here in the audience live, and of course 1,400, 1,800 people or so across the globe listening as we go through this. I've learned a tremendous amount this morning already. And it was only 30 days ago or so that I was sitting in the Palo Alto cafeteria, and I was approached with this idea of speaking at this conference. And I immediately agreed. I had no details whatsoever. All I heard was 1,800 people, SAP global marketing team. I agreed immediately. And then I found out you have to condense your concepts into 15 minutes and deliver it. And I was like, okay, I'll figure that out. Now, how do you condense 30 years of scar tissue, right, which we teach today in a 20-hour deep immersion workshop, into a 15-minute presentation? But I knew I have a plan, I have a path, there's techniques that I use to get myself ready for these. And then about 2 weeks later, I get a request for my bio. And I have a bio. It's written, it changes periodically, but it's fairly standard. But this request for a bio had a page 2. And on page 2, I had to identify my heroes. Now, the last time I thought about my heroes was 30 plus years ago. And we live in an age where we're over-indexed with information, nonstop, right? And it's like, how in the heck am I going to figure out who my heroes are? And so I did what I normally do. I went to Allen Parkway. I live in Houston, Texas. And in Houston, the only place you're going to get any elevation at all for a run, it's a grand total of about 20 feet up and down, is an Allen Parkway. And I went for a run. And as I went on this run, ideas started streaming through and into my head. And what I realized that it's not so much about heroes, right? There's 5 key principles that come from 5 different individuals that have actually shaped a lot of the way in which I deliver strategy, my presentations, content, all of those things. And as I was going through this run, I realized that 3 of those 5 quotes, as I think of them, were going to form the basis for this presentation today. And first thing that I did is I said, okay, let's come up with this top 10 list that I'm going to walk the audience through. 10 things that you can do that are going to be high impact for you, that you can apply when you go back to work this afternoon, tomorrow, and the next day. And we're going to go through those top 10 right now. Okay, so number 1, disassociate. I was fascinated by the fact that whenever I go on a run, I get these ideas. And I asked my content development team, I was like, look, I don't know if there's something to this. I've talked to 5 or 6 friends of mine who have the similar experience. They're able to exercise or do something that releases creativity in their mind. Please go figure out what it is that's causing this, because if it's working for me, it could certainly work for other people. Turns out that there's this concept of disassociation. And if you're able to engage the left part of your brain, which is the logical part of your brain, into some sort of repetitive motion, right, some sort of activity, it actually allows the creative part of your brain to work much better. Now, for me, it happens to be going on a run, putting on my iPod, and listening to any variety of music. It just frees up the right-hand side of my brain to come up with these ideas. And it happens every time, every single time. I've trained my body to do this. That running may not be your thing. It may be something else, right? It might be going for a walk. If you're a musician, if you're a piano player, maybe it's doing the scales up and down, right? But the point is, find an activity that you can just go into autopilot and put a kernel in your brain before you get into that activity that you're going to think about whatever problem, idea, issue that you're trying to solve. And if you'll follow this pattern and do it repetitively, you'll tune and you'll train your body to actually flow these ideas out. So that's step number 1. And I didn't know any of that before delivering this, before preparing for this presentation, which is what I love about doing these. You always learn something. Number 2. 93%. People get so wrapped up around the words that they're going to use when they're going to deliver a presentation. And they spend all of their time trying to figure out what words they're going to use. And they write them down. And, they're starting PowerPoint, which, my gosh, get out of PowerPoint as fast as you can. It's the creative destruction. Okay? And at the end of the day, what percentage of the believability of your message is actually from the words that you use? It's 7%. But people spend 80% of their time figuring out their words. It's not about the words. It's about the experience that you provide your audience. It's about how you stand, how you look, how you sound, whether you've got energy coming through. Because people are going to believe those that are passionate, much more so than those that are stale. You could have the very best content, the very best story, and if you deliver it in a flat, boring way, nobody's going to remember any of it. So focus on the delivery. Much more important. Okay? You can't ignore the content. You've got to have it, but 93% is on delivery. Okay, minimize. I just shared with you that it's a really good idea to not start anything in PowerPoint. It's a necessary evil. You will sometimes have to use it. Now, you want to minimize the number of slides you use when you're delivering any presentation at all. There's lots of schools of thought around how many slides per minute you should use. You know, I've seen 30-minute long presentations that have 60 slides in it. I don't call that a presentation. I call that a movie. There's a reason that these things are called visual aids. They're not intended to replace who you are and the message you're delivering, right? They're just supposed to support your message. Now, other schools of thought are you should use 1 per minute, 2 per minute. I say it's about 3 to 4 minutes per slide, and that's really the most. The presentation's about you. It's not about your slide. So minimize the number of slides you use. Number two, the reason you want to minimize the slides is if you use this concept of disassociation and you start to train your body to do that, and you start to repeat these processes even the day of the presentation. So this morning I went for a run because I just repeat this process. It works for me. Find what works for you. You're going to get new ideas. And guess when you're going to get those ideas? The morning of the presentation. If your slide deck is so unbelievably scripted and you've had to submit your slides ahead of time, which means you can't show up with a key and change your deck, you're stuck. You cannot apply that idea because it's not going to follow the flow of your slides. So minimize the number of slides that you're going to use. It allows you much more creative freedom in what's going to actually happen the day of the event. And frankly, your audience is much more interested in listening to you than they are looking at a slide. Okay? Now, if you've got to use slides, and a lot of times you do, also minimize the number of crazy things that are happening on these slides. Things flying in and out or spinning around or going up and down. It's all very appealing and fun maybe to create, but again, it's really a distraction from what the audience needs to hear, which is your specific message. Fear is your friend. They say presenting is the #1 fear, according to the book of lists. You've probably heard that. Death is number 4. So people would rather be dead than give a presentation. You know, it's all about perspective. It's all about perspective. When you present, you're getting ready to present, you do get a lot of nervous energy that starts to flow through your body. Right? Recognize that you're going to have that nervous energy. We've been conditioned since we were children to not stand out. Right? In class, raise your hand. Be quiet. Ask, don't ask questions unless you're asked. And we've got to break out of that mold. But unfortunately, we've been conditioned that way. And if you just change your perspective around that nervous energy and view it as a positive energy, channel that energy as a way to communicate much more impactfully to your audience. Channel it, transfer it out, push it out to everybody, right? And just change your perspective on the presentation itself. So people get worried about making presentations, and they'll delay preparing, and they'll push it out, and I'll get to it the next day. Well, preparation clearly is a way to get around, minimizing your nervousness, and I'll talk about how you prepare in a second. But also view that presentation from a different angle. Don't view it as on top of you, coming down, facing, bearing down on you. Stand over it and look down on it. That one little change in perspective makes it much smaller, more manageable. It's down there. You can deal with it, right? It's not this big, huge thing crashing down on your head. And what's the worst thing that's going to happen? You're not going to die, right, when you stand on stage. So, number 6, engage. There's been a lot of conversation around engagement. Engaging with your audience, making them stand up, raise their hand, move around, answer questions, all of those things help you get your message across, but also help you allow and give you time to manage your fear. So if you've got a lot of fear about what you're going to talk about, best thing that you can do, first thing you do when you get up on stage, engage your audience immediately. Bounce it off of you and onto them. Have them do something. And it's going to also help them remember the message much more clearly, because it's the physical connection between the words that you're using and the way in which they're moving their body that's going to help anchor what it is that you're saying inside of them physically. Number 5, I love this one. If you don't think you can, you must. This is not mine. This comes from a friend and mentor, Tony Robbins, arguably one of the very best speakers on the planet. And presenting really is all about leadership. It's all about leadership. Every time you get on the platform, whether it's in front of your colleagues, your customers, your peers, some social group, it's about your opportunity to lead. It shows leadership. And the harder the challenge, the harder the presentation, the more you must accept it. Because it's that scar tissue, right? It's that experience. It's going to make it easier and easier and easier for you the next time you go and present. My very first business presentation, I had to get on a plane. I had no notice whatsoever, 0. It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm sitting in my office. I'm about to go home. I get a phone call from my boss, and he says, I need you to fly to D.C. and deliver a presentation tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., to about 500 people on how to negotiate distribution agreements. I didn't know anything about distribution agreements, but the man was sick and needed me to go. So I got on a plane. I went to D.C. I delivered that presentation. I barely made it in time. But, you know, it's those kinds of experiences that make the next presentation easier, and the next one easier, and the next one easier. So don't shy away. If somebody gives you the opportunity to present, take it. Take it. Because you're never going to improve yourself if you don't take advantage of those opportunities, and they're everywhere. They're all around you every single day. Don't wait. Number 4, best way to predict the future is to create it. Peter Drucker. How true is that? Do you think that the very best presentations happen on the day of the presentation? No. It's all the prep that goes into it. Everything that happens before. It's everything that happens before. And there's a specific cadence that I'll walk you through. Now, this is my cadence, and it works for a lot of other folks. Try it out. Works like this. It starts 30 days out from the presentation. At what I call N-30, and for the next 2 weeks, step 1, get a partner. Get a partner. This does not have to be a partner that works in the same company as you, but get somebody who you respect, have good dialogue with, and engage them in the development of your presentation. Now, they're not going to build it for you, right? Their role is really to be a sounding board. Step number 1. Now, for the next 2 weeks, simply bounce ideas back and forth between you and your partner. You may have a few partners, but just bounce ideas. Don't worry about the ideas. Don't worry about whether they make sense or not. You know, you have BlackBerrys, iPhones, whatever. Email them as they come up, and they're going to come up in all kinds of weird times and places. If you're using the disassociation principle like I do, the running, they're going to come up when they're running. And do I use a BlackBerry when I'm on runs? Yeah, I do. I actually carry it with me on my run because I know there's a specific purpose for that run. And send them into your partner. Simply bounce them back and forth. Okay? 14 days out, it's time to settle out the ideas. Spend the next 7 days organizing your information. Sequence it. Research it, assemble it, so that it starts to make sense. Keep doing this with your partner. 7 days out, this is where you need to rehearse. And you need to do 3 dry runs. Now, dry run doesn't mean I'm going to think about it in my head. Doesn't mean pulling out your slides and reading them or writing a script, right? It means standing and physically having the words come out of your mouth, because you're connecting your brain with how it's going to feel coming out of your mouth. And you have to do that 3 times. Now, you can do it more than 3 times if you want, but do it 3 times. And you'll improve every single time. 1 day out. It's D-Day, right? This was last night. Don't get your slides out, okay? Again, simply rehearse by memory the flow of the information that you're going to present. Make sure that it is ingrained inside of you so that if something were to happen on stage, for example, the power goes out and you don't have access to your slides, you're fine. You're set. You're all prepared. Or if the pointer doesn't work, or any number of things, right? And it's all that preparation, which, by the way, helps alleviate all that fear and anxiety that you can build up as you get ready to go on stage. Then you just don't worry about it and you deliver the next day. Don't worry about it. Stop thinking about it. Now, you've been sitting. Let's go to point number 2, talk or behave. Now, you've been sitting here for about 2 hours, so let's do a little experiment. Everybody, please stand up. Okay, so if you have never, ever, ever made a New Year's resolution, sit down. One person, good. Okay, there's normally one. All right. If you made a New Year's resolution and you were able to only stick with it for 30 days or less, sit down. Okay? 90 days? $120 days? A year? Okay. All right, so think about this. People go through that New Year's resolution process for a reason. There's typically something they want to change. And sometimes it's very personal, sometimes it's not, right? It could be as personal as I want to improve the relationship with my family, or it could be I want to quit smoking, or I want to exercise more, or whatever. And they're very committed to that resolution. Yet, look at this room. There was one person standing who was able to have that stick for 6 months or more. Now, typically, I get a 5% hit rate on that question. 5% of the people are able to make this last for more than a year. And there's this concept, which is you're not going to talk your way out of something you behaved your way into. You've got to behave your way out of it. You've got to behave your way out of it. So you've heard a lot of great information here today from me and from others, but what are you going to do about it? How are you going to make any change really happen for yourself? And talking about it isn't going to do it. So you've got to get a partner, and you've got to get a plan, and you've got to, guess what, put it into action. How fast? 24 hours. You're going to forget most of what you heard today over the next week, unless you put it into practice starting tomorrow. Tomorrow. So get a personal action plan with whoever your partner is going to be. And my final quote, you can't fail if you never stop trying. This is Yogi Bear. I saw this in the cartoon movie the other day with my kids. And Yogi Bear, of course, is the famous bear who's always wanting to get the picnic basket. All of us as presenters are never going to be fully satisfied with how we deliver our message. I don't care if you've delivered 10, 500, 1,000, or more presentations. There's always something you can do better. So number one, don't beat yourself up. Do not beat yourself up. I'm sure you did way better than you think you did. Number two, use every single presentation as a learning experience and use it as a way to improve the next one and the next one and the next one. Because becoming an exceptional presenter is not an event, it's a journey. It's an absolute journey that happens over time. Thank you very much.